Hey everyone, it's Arfon with the Successful Lead Generating Coaches Show, and I'm here today with a special guest. I have with me, I'm joined by Albert Pellissier. Did I say that correctly, Albert?
You sure did, Arfan.
All right, awesome. So Albert is a expert, a coach, and author of What's on Your Back Burner book. And I'm excited because I want to get my hands on this book because it really dives into using your dormant desire to relight your fire. And this is something that's really powerful, especially for a lot of us who've been on an entrepreneur journey or have been just going through life and feel like we want more out of life. This is a really, really great opportunity, and I'm excited to have this conversation. So, Albert helps ambitious individuals and entrepreneurs uncover the hidden inner resistance that's really quietly holding them back. And if you're listening to this, you could probably automatically already relate. Like there is an inner resistance, whether you can name it or you cannot name it. And that's what this conversation will be great for, especially if you cannot name it. Hopefully, we can maybe give you some tools to where you can start putting a name to it, right? So even if you think that you've done all the mindset work, he has a powerful and a really shockingly simple process to help you meet the part of yourself that doesn't want your goal to happen and to shift it from the inside out. Okay. So trust me when I say this isn't just a typical pep talk or a typical podcast interview. This is going to be some deep transformational stuff and some stuff that you may have only heard at a surface level. So I'm really, really excited to go on here. So if you've got goals and you can't seem to gain the traction to hit those goals, or if your motivation has been inconsistent and confusing, this episode is for you. And also at the very end of this conversation, we're actually going to give you an opportunity to get a copy of Albert's book. And also, Albert says you can have a chance to do a free chat with him where you could be able to have a conversation with you and see where you're at. And I'll have him talk more about that later on. So stay tuned to the end so you can be able to get more information about that. All right. So without further ado, Albert, again, thank you so much for having me. And I would just love to start off by just sharing a little bit about your journey and what led you to the point you are right now in your business.
I followed the typical script that we were taught, decades ago, which was to go into business for yourself and, be self-employed, put some
Hmm.
passive income in place, and that you get married, have some kids, and then all of that
Yeah.
would lead to happiness. And I followed the script, I followed the plan, got into multifamily real estate. But I found myself at some point, and my neighbors probably thought I was doing okay, but in my heart
Hmm.
of hearts, I wasn't really happy. I was pretty grouchy.
Hmm.
I had a bad reputation in the house. My wife would say, "Oh,
Hmm.
stay away from Dad. He's grouchy today." And
Oh no.
so, I was really kind of curious. How can you do everything right and still just don't get that inner satisfaction that is really
Yeah.
what we're looking for? And so, really, this led to a point where my business has actually started to take a turn for the worse. And my initial thought was, well, you know, this is bad. But last week when they were going okay, I still didn't really feel that great about it, right? So, is my only option here to just go back in and kind of get it going again. And I knew I could. Or
Hmm.
is there really some other missing piece? And so that's when I really started to look and see what was the missing ingredient. Uh, you know,
Gotcha.
that just kept it from feeling as good as I thought it should.
So I want to dive into that, right? So I was looking at your work and your website, and you said something, and I just wanted to get a little more information about it. So you describe yourself as someone who lives at the intersection where ambition and laziness meet. And I've never heard that because you don't really often put those two things together, ambition and laziness. So I want to just kind of hear about what does that really mean and how has it shaped your work?
Okay, so here's where that came from. Somebody told me one time, they said, when you look back on your life, you're going to realize that the whole thing was about resolving the differences in thinking between your mother and your father.
Mm,
And I thought about it. My mom was always this ambitious, kind of, street hustle. She wanted more, she'd grown up in the projects of New Orleans as a young girl, and she just wanted a nice house of her own, wanted to live in a nice neighborhood. My dad, on the other hand, he was a bartender in the New Orleans French Quarter, and he was happy just going and working his job, getting his tips, come home. He turned down every possible promotion. He never wanted to be, the food and beverage manager. He just wanted to make his money and go home. So,
Uh,
lazy might be a little harsh, but it wasn't that same level of ambition. And what I
yeah, I can
realized,
understand that.
when somebody said that to me was, wow, this is what I'm trying to do. I am ambitious. I do have goals. I want to achieve things, but at the same time, I have this kind
Hmm.
of counterbalancing thing. It's like, man, really, does it have to be hard? Can I just kind of put a minimal effort in and just trying to do those two things at the same time? You can see it's challenging. However,
Yeah.
I meet people who I think are really super successful, and when I talk about this, they admit, oh yeah, you know what, I'm lazy too. And that actually comes as a shock to me, because they don't look lazy, but I guess when they
No.
go home and you don't see them, killing it on the playing field, uh, apparently everybody has a little bit of laziness in them. We do want to put forth the least amount of effort.
Yeah, I feel like we can also look at that in two extremes. When we think of ambition, it's either you're the super ambitious person who's always hustling, they sacrifice sleep and they do whatever they got to do, and not looking at, well, I have ambition that I want to achieve more in life. I want to experience the best this life has to offer. At the same time, whereas the extreme of laziness is just on the couch and someone is just like drink a soda all day and just chilling on the couch. They're overweight, just lazy, not doing nothing, have no dollars in the bank account, right? And it's really not that. It's more just about it's about not really having to do this in a way that's hard and difficult, or that is like so stretching to where now I'm doing this, but I'm burned out doing it. I just like it's putting on a mask of like trying to show up for others rather than showing up for myself or showing up for who I am in it.
Yeah, and look, there is like a scale of laziness. So like if you're pathetically
Yeah.
lazy, yeah, you probably don't have a chance. I'm talking about, average laziness. And really, you used the word earlier. It's resistance. Um,
Mm.
people they do, even, quote unquote, reasonably lazy people, like we're talking about,
Yeah.
right? There's still things that they want to do. Uh,
Of course.
and so what I started really, I guess, exploring in myself and then realizing that it was also in others was that whatever goals I had, there was a kind of an internal part of my personality that I realized didn't want to do it.
Mm.
And I wasn't completely aware of it. It's not like that's front and center. You do things and you may slack here or there. Maybe you're not going all in on something, but I didn't really realize there was an active personality trait, inside, subconscious, really, that was didn't think my goals were a good idea.
Mm.
And that's really
Well,
that's the awareness I want to bring to people that if you haven't done it yet, if there's something, and the book is what's on your back burner. If there's something that's been on your back burner for, a year or 5 years or 10 years, or maybe, that project that you think you want to work on and you're pushing forward on it and fits and starts and doesn't work out, you give up. But you don't forget about it. For whatever reason, it kind of haunts you as like something you still want to do. Whenever you're in that situation, I'm willing to bet, 99.9% of the time, it's some aspect of your personality that doesn't think that this is a good idea.
hmm.
Now, if you don't figure this out and kind of identify this character and find a way to resolve it, and that's really what my three-step process does, is exactly that, is discover it, identify it, and then resolve it. If you don't do that, you're going to do the typical success things. You try to get better at time management. Maybe you work to-do lists. You try to buck up your discipline. You try to learn more about whatever it is you're doing. You're doing
Hmm.
all of these typical success-minded things. But here's the deal. if you don't discover this internal character that's working against you, you're not going to do it. You're not going to pull it off. You're not going to pull it off in the way that you really want to, because this character is you, it's a part of you, and it knows all of the right buttons to push to keep you from really going all in on it.
Yeah. So in your book, essentially the what we're saying here is that the biggest obstacle to the goals is that part of us, that internal character that not necessarily doesn't want it to happen, but it stops us from happening because we haven't really addressed it yet, right? So, can you explain more about that as far as what it means and how we can really uncover it? I know you kind of hinted at your three-step process there a bit.
Okay, so look, just to give it in a concrete story, this is when it came up for me. I was 36 years old. I had always wanted to get into real estate. I thought this was something that suited me. It was passive, but I'm kind of a sprinter. I can really do a lot of work in a short period of time, and then I want to coast. I said, oh, well, rental property is perfect, right? You get in there, you buy it, you kind of rehab it, and then you hang on to it. And for what,
Hmm.
and it's a challenging thing. You need a little bit of money. I didn't really have any money of any sort, no inheritance. I had been self-employed at that point for most of my life, but never really made much. My income at the time, now, again, these numbers are a little off because it's back in the 90s, but I really never made more than 2,500, 3,000 a month. So whatever that adds up to a year, 30,
Yeah.
35,000 a year. You're gonna have a hard time qualifying to buy real estate at that low of an income. Now, and that would be a plausible reason to say why I hadn't done it yet, and that's the one thing that I do in my presentations and say, hey, why do you think you haven't done it? And I would have said, well, I don't have the money, I don't have the down payment, so I'm not going to be able to do it.
Mhm.
But really, what it ended up being, and I was doing this self exploration exercise, and what I discovered was my dad, when I was a little boy, 10, 11, 12, and he would come home at night from, working his bar shift, and we got to stay up on the weekends and wait for him. He'd come home and he would tell me this story of that there was all these rich guys in his bar, and, they built hotels, they owned office buildings, that they were in there rubbing elbows with the local councilmen and stuff to get favors and things. But he would cap it by saying, you know why they're really in my bar on a Friday night? It's because their families can't stand them.
Wow.
Their wife and kids loathe them.
Wow.
Now, I'm hearing this as a kid. I'm not making too much about it. I don't really understand really what he's trying to tell me.
Yeah.
What I didn't realize was that story kind of embedded itself in my viewpoint of the world, my early programming. And so it was this belief that, well, if you become wealthy, your wife and children will get to the point where they can't stand you.
Mm.
And that's the reason, at 36 years old, my wife and I just had our first child. I knew I needed to make more. I knew I needed to do more. That's what I knew in my conscious will. Like, this is the way forward for me. I know it. But at the same time, what I didn't realize was this story that sort of implanted itself at 10, 11, 12 years old. He told it all the time.
Yeah.
It was creating this inner conflict. So, that part of my personality was thinking, okay, yeah, this is not a good idea, right? Do you really want to
Yeah.
go and become wealthy? Because this isn't going to lead to anything good. Now,
Hmm.
again, I'm not hearing that in my conscious mind. It's just going on where this other part of myself is saying, no, it's not a good idea. I don't want you to do this. Stay in this sort of, you know,
That's fascinating.
get by mentality where you're paying the bills, but you're not really pushing forward. And
It's really
so I ended up,
fascinating.
yeah. So look, I ended up resolving this character and um, made peace with it, understood what it was trying to do, and ended up coming to the conclusion that this was not going to be true for me. So
Yeah.
this is happening in late 1999.
Gotcha, gotcha. So you explored it. You realized that there was a story that you got from your father, And earlier in the show, you mentioned is like the dialogue or the converse or the inner dialogue between mom and dad. So in your case, it was something that happened with dad. But for
Yeah.
a lot of us, it could be anything. It's not only mom and dad, but it could be an aunt or uncle or like someone of influence who says something and is now that is a story that we're holding on to, and it's really and there may be many of this, right? Maybe, is it just one thing normally, or is it many of it, or how does?
It's like wherever you're stuck, whenever you feel like for whatever reason you're not able to push forward on something that you think you want to do, you're saying you want to do it, you've put effort into it, maybe here and there, and you're
Hmm.
not making traction or you're not really pouring all in, you just seem to be not going for it.
Hmm.
Then there's it's to me it's a sign that there's some sort of inner conflict. So
Gotcha.
think about this aspect of my personality, right? Uh, and we could name it, little Al. So little Al is thinking, hey, this is dangerous, right? You're going to go for this, and you may blow up your family, which is what you really care about the most. So
Hmm.
I don't think it's a good idea to pursue this goal. So little Al, unbeknownst to me, right, can sort of shake me off the trail, like, yeah, no, you know that's not a good idea. Maybe you should do something else. Go get a job, or try to work harder in what you're doing. It's given me other ways to, and look, in some sense, when you're really going after a new project, you're pushing, you're spending money, you're investing things, you're taking risk. What it was going to take in this case for me, Arfan, was to borrow all the home equity out of the house that I had just bought a year before. It took me 6 years to save up that down payment. And now what was at risk was going out and taking out a HELOC and borrowing the entire 35,000 and plunking it down on a piece of real estate in a business I had never been involved in. So you can
Yeah.
imagine there is a part of yourself saying, hey, is this a good idea?
Yeah, it's a big
You spent a
risk. Yeah.
long time, right, saving this up, and now you're going to risk it all. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. So
but
I appreciate that because then it's really just like whatever it is that you want to do, that pulling that you have, that thing that's always calling towards you, essentially like not facing that's the core issue. Or not even say issue, but that's the core there's a belief there that has to be addressed. Whether there's multiple or not, whatever that one particular one is right there is where we need to address it. So how does that work, right? And I think you mentioned a three-step process, but I also saw where it's like you can really kind of get some light on this within about 15 minutes. Is that true?
yeah, so the first part of the exercise, and this is in the book, this is kind of the awakening thing is on one side I say, hey, what's your goal, right? And then what are the reasons you think you haven't done it? And those are, they're all damn good reasons, they're plausible. But if I
Hmm.
reframe the question, and flip the worksheet over and I say, okay, look, I want you to skip past the if I can do it, the doubt of whether you can pull it off or not, and put you into the headspace where you're saying, hey, you're doing it. It's done. You own the rental property, or you wrote your book, or you started this organization, or you left your job and you went out on your own. Whatever it is that you're doing. Okay, now that you're doing it, it's no longer a matter of can you do it. Now I want to know what bothers you, what worries you, what concerns you about this new reality you've created. And when you're asked that question, that inner personality will answer and tell you all of the reasons why it doesn't think it's a good idea. And, it
Wow.
sounds a little crazy, it sounds a little schizophrenic, really, but instantly people just, they can just knock out 8, 10, 15 reasons. They start
Hmm.
saying, oh, well, hey, what if I invest all this money and I really don't know what I'm doing, and I'm forced out, or the market turns and I lose this, and then I lose my home. These would be worries and concerns.
Yeah.
What if my wife doesn't think it's a good idea, and I do it anyway, and she ends up saying I ended up wrecking the family finances, and it leads to some kind of split or divorce. These would be the concerns of that inner personality, and they're they're
Yeah.
valid.
They're valid. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're valid. These are all things that lead to a sense of an exaggerated sense of loss.
Mm,
So this counterbalancing inner subconscious personality, it's really keeping this whole list of reasons that it thinks of things you could lose if you do it, right?
gotcha.
And if I'm doing a workshop live or doing a keynote where I'm doing this speech, you can just see the stunned look on people's faces. They really realize for the first time, oh wow, I know on some level I'm thinking this, but I've never really seen it in black and white written down on paper. And
Yeah.
it is shocking. So the prescription is to do a new list every day for 7 to 10 days. And, the reasons keep coming. But what you do
Wow.
realize as the days go on is that first initial shock of um, the scariness factor of it, it starts to dissipate
Hmm.
as you realize that these things that you're saying out loud, maybe they're not relevant as you thought, because it typically comes from a younger version of yourself. So when I was doing this, thing personally, I'm 36, right? But I'm sort of debating back and forth with the 12-year-old version of myself. So, the
Yeah.
36-year-old version is thinking, okay, well, maybe that's not so relevant. Now, that doesn't solve the problem completely, Arfan, but you start to become aware, like, oh, I do have this long list of things that, you know, would be bad if they.
Yeah. It's like this list of all the fears, concerns, and things that really just standing in the way of the now that we put our mind in, okay, you're living in this now. It's no longer a daydream or a wish. What's coming up now? And those are very valid because our mind is so powerful that when we are visualizing and imagining, we really are sometimes in this reality. So what comes up is very tangible and very, is valid. But I like what you're saying is like it may not be real, but at least we're gaining awareness for it now. So we could start to see and we could take a look and see, okay, well, are these, you could tell me if I'm incorrect here, but we could start looking and saying, okay, there's these are legit, these are kind of silly, these are kind of like way wild, but it's what my mind is coming up with anyways. Um, I'm actually curious to know if you would mind sharing if in this entire process if there has been one of your clients or even with yourself that have just really had a powerful breakthrough or that you just was just surprising to even you or to them using this process.
Well, for me personally, right, I pulled the trigger on buying those two duplexes. They were just a block from my house, and I intended to buy one. I ended up buying two, and
Oh,
I
okay.
rehabbed them. I got the rents up. I had more people paying a little higher rent and getting in there. And then I was really excited. I found other things I wanted. And the bank said, well, man, now you have a mortgage, you have, this HELOC loan. Now you just took out two more. We can't loan you any more money. I finally found a bank that said if I sold one of the duplexes I just bought, they would lend me the money to buy these two fourplexes. And I did it.
Hmm.
Okay, so this happened in April of 2000. So here's what I want you to realize, Arfan. In 120 days after resolving this inner conflict,
Yeah.
I had 10 rental units, each one clearing about $200 a month. Free cash flow was 2 grand.
Wow.
It was almost doubling my income. Now, you
Yeah.
know, these aren't big, huge numbers. It wasn't like I could go buy a jet airplane or anything, but for me, it was significant to, double my income, realizing this was just one inner conflict. And
Hmm.
and then, so then I started sharing it. So my very first client that I took this through, a guy was 50 years old, self-employed, had a videography business, was raising two sons on his own. And he confessed to me that the business was just losing money every month. And he had borrowed all the home equity out of his home to keep it afloat, but he was really up against the wall because he didn't really know what was, how to turn it around. And so it turned out his inner character that was giving him the most grief was really his inner critic, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. So he told
Yeah.
me from the time he was 8 years old, his inner critic, this inner voice was just say like, you're stupid, this is dumb, why do you do that? You're going to screw this up again. Just this long list. And yeah, it's tough enough just to get out there and succeed when things are going okay, but when you're just ragging yourself like that internally.
Yeah.
So, you know, the third part of the final part of my process, and this is really where I can be the most valuable to people, is helping him have a conversation with this critic to find the common ground. That's the end goal. So
Hmm.
his inner critic did want to be successful, but the methodology that the inner critic went about was not taking chances, not taking risks, not making mistakes. Well, you know that it's hard to succeed if you're really in that mindset, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But and look, this sounds a little crazy again, but this was an hour and a half conversation between him and his inner critic, and he would talk, and then he would give a chance for his inner critic to talk, right? And again, I know it sounds a little nuts, but that second side of that worksheet where you're saying what worries you, what concerns you, this is what the inner critic was talking about. Like, this is what
Hmm.
concerns me. You've done this before, you've taken chance, you've wasted money on this and that. And so it's telling him, look, you've been here many times before, you've wasted money, you've wasted effort. I don't want you to waste because it's a loss, especially
Hmm.
when the funds are low. So funds are low, this is a loss. Uh, that inner critic was just suggesting he doesn't do anything different, which
Hmm.
wasn't working. But once they realized that they both did want to succeed, he kind of made a vow to his inner critic that he would be cautious. He would consult the inner critic to make sure he wasn't doing anything rash. But at the same time, he was asking a favor from the inner critic to back off a little bit and let's take some chances and try to make something happen. So they made a deal, right? They
Yeah.
made, and that's the same thing I did with, probably what I would think of as, my inner person, innocent, maybe like scarcity mindset. Uh, that's who I'm talking to, right? So he makes
Hmm.
a deal, and within 90 days, he ended up applying for a job that he said was a dream job that he had didn't even apply for 2 years prior, and he ended up being the communications director for the lieutenant governor, of our state. And
Nice.
it was a six-figure, state job. He got a car as part of it, insurance benefits, and he was able to keep his videography business, on the side, and he used that to kind of pay back his debt. And the guy, he just took off. His life completely changed. He was
In
fired
90
up.
days.
Just like that. It was amazing just to watch.
Yeah.
He just, he made that move and applied for that job and had the confidence to go for it. And then he liked his video business, but now instead of seeing it as, it wasn't enough to make a living on and it was bringing him down, he just kept
Hmm.
all the jobs he had and he would shoot them on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, and it all went into his pocket. And then, he used that to get himself out of the hole he was in. And then he had the steady job too. And,
Wow.
it was just a game changer. And so the book is just filled with real stories from my clients because it just, it happens fast, you know?
Yeah. No, when you
When,
were talking, what I was thinking about was just it was really interesting, right? A lot of times, as humans, as people in general, a lot, because we can be drawn to these get quick type of things, right? So like get quick weight loss or get rich quick or all these different things. When in my own life experience too, it's been very similar when addressing just a lot of the internal work has led to the quickest breakthroughs. And we can often underestimate how much could actually happen in 30 days, in 90 days, 120 days, like you mentioned, or even 1 year. We can just underestimate how much can be changed. Someone going through like myself over the past 8 months, I've been on a weight loss journey. And I have been doing a lot of somewhat of this work, tackling some of these to address that. And the more I have been doing that, like the more it's just releasing and coming off. And I also see the benefit of this too as well when we're looking at what is that goal we have when we're talking about our career or our finances or a business endeavor or the contribution we want to make to the world, where coming into awareness of this character, going through the process of the 7 days of actually looking and seeing what all the fears and concerns and all that dialogue is. And then you think the final portion is really having that dialogue and coming to like a negotiation, so to say, or a term, and then having a partnership that is actually transformative. And I've never heard anyone teach this. Well, I told you guys at the beginning of the show, you're gonna get something that is different. It's not a cookie cutter, just a regular interview. You're getting something deep here.
So, think about it. A good metaphor to think about this is okay, if you're a train, a train car, you're the engine in the front, that's your will, your conscious will. You're trying to pull all these, cars behind you. But at the opposite end, there's an engine faced in the other direction attached to the same, set of train cars. That inner character voice is that engine really pulling in the opposite direction. So it's hard
Mm,
to move forward, but if you can lift that engine up off the tracks like it was a model train, flip it around, point it in the same direction you're going because you agreed that you both want the same thing, but you just had different ways to go about it. Can you see the difference in how that train would move forward?
mm.
I
Yeah.
mean, now you got two engines going in the same direction instead of one actively pulling against you because it feels that it's the wrong way. It's the wrong path. It's not safe.
Yeah.
It's going to lead to loss. That's why, one of my little things is, I believe in ROE, which is return on effort. Uh,
Mm.
I want the biggest return for the least amount of effort. That goes back to, my lazy gene there. Uh,
Yeah.
but nature wants the most for the least. Lightning takes the path of least resistance. So does water. It is natural to want to take the path of least resistance. So
I love that.
I want to know, look, by the time you're an adult, you probably have the basics to be successful. And if you're not doing what you want to do, there's something else going on. You have one of these train cars pointed in the wrong direction. You have to flip it around. Otherwise, all the willpower in the world, it's just not going to help. So why go through all of that, right? All of that effort to try to make
Yeah.
yourself a better version of yourself when the easiest thing to do is get aligned with your own side where you're not working against yourself. And now you don't have to really be a super version of yourself. You can take the same level of discipline that you have now, the same level of hours and resources that you have, but you're no longer working against yourself. That's why it's so dramatic.
Hmm. Yeah, I
It's
love this too. The analogy you gave, there's a saying that and we've heard this a lot, where it's like get out your own way. But the way I look at this, an analogy you gave is really not, no, it's not get out your own way. It's work, partner with with yourself. And now it's like instead of you trying, instead of the train pulling in the opposite direction, which will always win because we have to rest. Our conscious mind will shut off, and that subconscious is still going to be going. You wake up and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, I'm 2 miles back from where I was. So I really love what you're saying here as far as this goes. Now, you work with individuals and entrepreneurs. Am I correct with that?
right.
Okay. Are there any common patterns or like inner conflicts that like show up across the board, regardless of entrepreneur or individual or anything like
You,
that?
it's always interesting for me. Whenever I'm doing this as a workshop or a group or, people bring me in to do this at their retreats. I'm always curious to see what's going to come up, but one of them you see a lot of stuff around money, and
Mm,
this may sound crazy, and this would probably tie into similar. Like I didn't believe there was a such thing as fear of success, but this will give you a little tip on a believable fear of success. So one of the concerns that people's inner character may have is, well, I don't know if I can handle this amount of money coming in. They
mm,
may say,
wow.
oh, my goal is to hit six figures or seven figures, right? But there's another part of them that says, if I get that much money, which I've never had before, will I mismanage it and end up worse than I am now? Now, this sounds crazy. So essentially, what they're saying is, I would rather not get the money in the first place than to get it and then lose it.
Wow.
it's
That's
so
interesting.
it comes up in every event. There's people I had a lady one time and she said she had never thought about this consciously, but she secretly had a concern that if she made more money than her husband, that he would leave her.
Wow.
Now, she admitted later that she really didn't think he would leave her, but it was just, she always made sure to make less money than her husband.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
after the event, 2 weeks later, she was like a consultant in the finance industry. She would work and train. She was like a trainer, and she would work with big finance companies. She booked 200 and something thousand dollars worth of contracts within
Wow.
within 2 weeks of realizing that it was just this one conflict about thinking she couldn't make more money than her husband.
Yeah.
So, she wasn't in my group or anything. I had gone to a retreat to do this for someone, but people
Hmm.
who knew her were in the group said later, I said, "Hey, she's still married." Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
I'm sure her husband actually was thrilled, with
I'm
the
pretty sure he was. I would be
yeah,
if that was the
yeah,
case. Like, yeah, I'm gonna leave you because you just made 250
yeah,
grand.
exactly. Hey, babe, what took you so long? Oh, I just
Yeah.
said I had to, get over the fact is that's okay. Here's the other one. This one's insidious too. You'll see a lot of reasons from your inner character on what other people are going to think about whatever it is
Mm.
you're doing or succeeding at. Sometimes it's like people in their family, like, oh, then all my brothers and sisters are going to be, think like, oh, well, now you think you're too good for us, things like that, where, it's like the whatever the crab getting out of the pot, a lot of fears of leaving
Yeah.
people behind. Sometimes they are worried about their spouse thinking they're kind of on a runaway train or parents. A lot of times it's fears of, let's say, if it's social media related, that in order to do this you're really going to have to put yourself out there. You're going to have to start a podcast or a YouTube channel or write a book. People are worried about the critical feedback that would come from either comments as they essentially step up and get more exposure. They're worried about what people are going to say, think, or do.
Mm.
Now here's why this is insidious.
Mm.
If if what's holding you back is based on what someone else is going to say or think, do you have any control over that whatsoever?
Not at all.
Okay, so it's really not something you can resolve very easily. You can't make sure everyone in the world is going to behave the way you want when
Yeah.
you're doing this, right? The only thing you can do is be willing to feel the sensation of that person saying or doing whatever they're saying. That's within your power. So if I have a client that is predominantly concerned with the way other people are going to react, the pathway forward is to get them to open up and be willing to feel the discomfort of
Mm.
being criticized or talked about or you know um, being some of your family saying something to you like, hey, that you find um, is kind of separating you from your group or your tribe in some way. You have to be willing
Yeah.
to just feel that feeling, because that's all it is just a feeling. That
Hmm.
feeling is that person has defined as uncomfortable or painful. And so what their inner character is doing is helping them to avoid that pain or discomfort by not going forward on their goals or dreams, in which case there's no criticism or negative feedback. You see, so they're okay, right? They're safe.
Yeah.
You're safe by not doing it because there's no chance of all
Yeah.
that. You're not subjecting yourself. Now, this is huge, Arfan. This will keep people totally stuck.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because it's just that, the your your inner dialogue, the inner character, the subconscious in a sense is not gonna let you move forward with anything with all that there. And it really comes down to something that's uncontrollable, really. It's also false because we also don't know if any of that will happen. It could also be a complete opposite. We don't know what people's behavior is going to be like. Even if we think we know them so much, they could
Yeah,
surprise
and,
us.
and look, you are you get some of it. Uh, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
it, it, But if you can be okay with it, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, there's one thing in the entrepreneur space we say is that once you start seeing people hate on you, that's how you know you're doing it. Like you're on the right path because it's almost inevitable to see it happens. When we run ads, we see it all the time in our ads where you get trolls, you get people who don't even know you who will just have to have some kind of comment for they don't
Right.
know they don't know any better and they just commenting their inner feelings to
And
out
which
loud.
one do most people fixate on too, right?
They have that
The,
negative one.
the 100 good ones or the one complainer, it's just human nature. That's the one you can't forget, is the one who says something nasty
Yeah.
about you. So look, for a lot of people, that's enough, Arfan, for them not to go forward.
Yeah. So I love the whole process you shared right now, the whole deal. And I think everyone who's listening probably want to say, all right, they want to get going now. They want to start the process. They want to take this further. Let them know how they can get a hold of the book, how they can get a hold of you to be able to have you guide them through this so they're not doing it on their own. So they can make a change that could be quick, but not more importantly, it could be lasting.
Yeah, so go to backburnerbook.com and there's a link on there to get the book. There's also a link that says work with Albert if you want to schedule a free coaching call with me and I'll help you unpack some of this. The bottom line though, I do want to say, for whoever wants to move forward, you got to do the exercise. They're not long, but I do find, and I was exactly like this myself, where I would read a book and you get to the end of the chapter and it would say, make this list or whatever. And for most of my
Hmm.
life, I would just skip to the next chapter and start reading. I thought there was one piece of knowledge that I was missing. And if I just knew this one secret answer, everything would, fall into place. And what I found was, that didn't happen until I started doing the homework. So
Mm.
this is not a book you can just read the stories. I mean, it would be helpful, but you really have to do at least that first exercise that we were talking about, where you write the goal down and the reasons you think you haven't done it, and then flip it over and get into that different mindset and admit to yourself what this inner character's thinking. And you have to do it at least a week. It only takes 10 minutes a day, but you still have to do it for a week. And then after a week long, you start to feel the change in the energy. And that should motivate you to do the last two steps, which is to really dig in and identify that character, find out what they're all about, what they're getting their charge over, and how they have the power over you. And then in the last phase, make the deal. That's probably where most people would need my help is how do you
Mm.
really make a deal with yourself that's permanent and lasting? But I do promise that if you make a deal with your inner character, 90 days, 120 days, I mean, you won't recognize yourself. The people around you certainly won't recognize you. And, you're going to hit another ceiling, plateau of some point. And when you do,
Mm.
it's just like another layer. There's another character, and you can then do the same process, use the same process, and you can keep doing it. I've run into handfuls myself. Most of the people who work with me
Yeah.
end up helping them develop a list of 3 to 5. And we just do them one at a time, not more than one every couple months because you can become a little disoriented by changing too much. These are really protective mechanisms, Arfan, that they've been protecting you for your whole life. So it's not like you want to just toss them all away instantly. You want to work with them one at a time and just see the difference, and it'll give
Yeah.
you more confidence you'll realize what's available to you as you keep, flipping these engines around in the right direction. It's mind-boggling. I love to see it. Hey, I would love to hear people's stories too if they do it,
Yeah.
because I really get a thrill, out of the success stories because it is almost like magic, but you still got to do the homework.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. You ever see, I have kids, so I've ever seen them when the movie Inside Out or Inside Out 2. It's the one where they kind of go in the little girl's head and have her emotions. So she has the
Yeah,
sadness, anger, all these
yeah,
different joy and all that. So it kind of reminds me that you have like the characters, and essentially the one of the gist of it is you got to learn to work with these characters. And the more in partnership you are with them, the more success that starts to happen. So I'm excited to dive in and dig into the book myself, and also to schedule my own call with you so we can uncover some stuff and potentially looking at this. So I'm definitely looking forward to working with you. And for everyone listening right now, take advantage of the opportunity. It's very rare you come across someone who has the level of expertise and the depth of knowledge around this topic and around this subject, and that actually also has a proven framework that's not something that they've only done with themselves, but they've also done with others, others in a one-on-one setting, others in a workshop setting, a group setting, and a numerous setting. So Albert has the level of expertise you need to help you to really uncover what it is that inner resistance. And this is the biggest obstacle that's holding you back from achieving your goals. And we put it to the test. And like Albert says, in 90 days, 120 days, you will look different. You will feel different. You will be a different version of yourself, but a better version of yourself, that next best version of yourself. And it's something that I know all of us thrive for that, especially in the coaching world. A lot of us deal so much with the self-sabotage of really just, am I good enough, or that imposter syndrome that we can face. And really what it is not what's directly in front of you, but what's actually hidden underneath that. And once you can uncover that, that's where the key is. So I'm excited. Thank you so much, Albert, for being with us today, for sharing this information. Like I told you guys, it's deep. We were only able to cover so much on here. Yes, you could probably pause the video and write those things down, but don't just leave it at that, right? Step three is the most important one, and that's where Albert comes in. So Albert, remind us again, is backburnerbook.com/work with Albert if they want to book that call directly with you?
Yeah, do it. I'd be happy to help people just get started on this. And I know of all the work I've ever done in self-development, personal development, this is just the one that's going to give you the most bang for the buck.
All right, awesome. Love it. So there you go, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Albert, again, thank you so much. And with that being said, don't forget to give us a like, subscribe to the Lead Generating Coaches Show, share this with someone, especially if someone has been mentioning that they're kind of feeling stuck, they're kind of feeling like they're, they want to achieve some goals. Share this with them. And also don't forget to book your call with Albert. That being said, we'll catch you on the next episode. Have a great one, everyone. Bye-bye.